The cold desert air bit into Josephine Sullivan's skin as she stumbled along the dusty road, the rising sun casting long shadows across her tear-streaked face. Her father's final words still echoed in her ears. "No daughter of mine will disgrace this family with such behavior. Get out and never return." She clutched her hastily packed satchel containing everything she owned in the world, which wasn't much at all. Josephine had just turned 19 last week. What should have been a celebration had turned into her undoing when her father discovered her secret correspondence with the town's young schoolteacher, a man her father considered far beneath their family's station. The letters weren't even improper, merely thoughtful exchanges about literature and ideas, but that hadn't mattered to Clayton Sullivan, the wealthiest rancher in Florence, Arizona. The dirt road stretched endlessly before her, the town of Florence shrinking in the distance. Her throat burned with thirst, and her thin shawl offered little protection against the April morning chill that lingered in the desert air of 1878. She had no plan, no destination, just the desperate need to put distance between herself and the family that no longer wanted her. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn, squinting against the morning light. A lone rider approached from the north, his silhouette growing larger against the backdrop of the Superstition Mountains. Josephine hesitated, unsure whether to flag him down or hide. A woman alone on these roads wasn't safe, but she had little choice. As the rider drew closer, she could make out his features, a weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat, broad shoulders, and alert eyes that took in her disheveled appearance in one quick glance. He pulled his chestnut mare to a stop beside her, dust swirling around them both. "Miss, you all right?" His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that marked him as not being from these parts originally. "I'm fine, thank you," Josephine replied, lowering her gaze and clutching her satchel tighter. Her voice betrayed her, cracking on the last word. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He was taller than she'd realized and dressed in worn riding clothes that spoke of hard work and long days in the saddle. "You don't look fine," he said bluntly, but not unkindly. "And these roads aren't safe for a young woman alone." "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, hating the vulnerability in her voice but too exhausted to hide it. The man studied her for a long moment, his eyes taking in her hastily donned dress, the small satchel, and the redness around her eyes. Something in his expression shifted. "Name's Adam Lawson," he said. "I've got a ranch about 20 miles north, heading there now." "Josephine Sullivan," she replied automatically, then winced at giving her real name. If her father sent men looking for her, recognition flashed in Adam's eyes. "Sullivan, Clayton Sullivan's daughter," she stiffened. "Not anymore." Adam's gaze turned toward Florence, then back to her, a decision forming in his mind. "You're coming with me," he said, the words more statement than question. "I beg your pardon, you heard me." He gestured to his horse. "You can't stay here, and I'm not about to leave you to die in the desert or fall prey to the kind of men who travel these roads. So, Miss Sullivan, you're coming with me." Josephine hesitated, weighing her non-existent options. She knew nothing about this man except his name and that he owned a ranch. But the alternative was the desert's unforgiving heat by day and freezing cold by night, or worse, being found by her father's men and dragged back home in disgrace. "Why would you help me?" A shadow passed over Adam's face. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be cast out." He extended his hand. "Decision's yours, but I'm not leaving you here." After a moment's hesitation, Josephine placed her hand in his. His palm was calloused but his grip gentle as he helped her mount his horse. He swung up behind her, and she stiffened at the unfamiliar proximity of a male body so close to hers. "Hold on," he said simply, and clicked his tongue, urging the mare forward. As they rode away from Florence, Josephine felt a strange mix of terror and relief. She had no idea what awaited her at Adam Lawson's ranch, but for now, she was moving forward away from the home that had never truly been hers, and toward an uncertain future that, at the very least, would be of her own making. The desert landscape stretched around them, vast and intimidating. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels watching their passage, while in the distance, the mountains loomed purple against the brightening sky. Adam kept the horse at a steady pace, mindful of carrying double weight. "How far did you walk?" he asked after they'd been riding for some time. "Since dawn," Josephine replied. "About 2 hours, I think." Adam made a sound in his throat. "Lucky I came along when I did. Another few hours and the heat would have been unbearable." "I'm not unfamiliar with the desert, Mr. Lawson. Call me Adam." "And knowing the desert from a comfortable ranch house is different from surviving in it, Miss Sullivan." She couldn't argue with that. "Josephine, please, or Josie." And, "Thank you." They fell into silence again, the rhythmic movement of the horse lulling Josephine despite her anxiety. She hadn't slept at all the night before, when her father had discovered the letters and locked her in her room, promising to deal with her in the morning. She'd slipped out her window before sunrise, knowing what dealing with her would entail a forced marriage to one of her father's business associates, most likely. "You should rest if you can," Adam said, seeming to sense her exhaustion. "I won't let you fall." Despite her better judgment, Josephine found herself leaning back slightly, her eyes growing heavy as the adrenaline that had sustained her began to fade. She woke with a start when the horse's gait changed. The sun was higher now, the day warming up. They were approaching a creek lined with cottonwood trees, a welcome sight in the arid landscape. "We'll stop here to water the horse and rest a bit," Adam said, dismounting and then helping Josephine down. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her, and she stumbled slightly. Adam's hands caught her elbows, steadying her. "Easy there," he said, his voice softer than before. Up close, Josephine could see that his eyes were a striking blue, set in a face that had seen its share of sun and hardship. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way that the young men in Florence were, with their clean-shaven faces and fashionable clothes. Adam Lawson's appeal was rougher, more authentic, a face shaped by experience rather than social expectations. He released her arms once she was steady, then led his horse to the water. Josephine followed, kneeling by the creek to splash cool water on her face and drink from cupped hands. "Are you hungry?" Adam asked, pulling a small bundle from his saddlebag. Josephine nodded, suddenly aware of the hollow feeling in her stomach. He unwrapped some jerky and hardtack, simple trail food but welcome nonetheless. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, eating in companionable silence. "May I ask why you were in Florence?" Josephine ventured eventually. Adam took his time answering, chewing thoughtfully. "Supplies, and to mail some letters." "You don't sound like you're from Arizona territory." A small smile touched his lips. "Kentucky originally, came west after the war." The war between the states had ended 13 years ago, but its shadow still stretched long across the country. Josephine wondered which side he'd fought for, but knew better than to ask. Such questions were considered impolite in mixed company, especially in border territories like Arizona. "And your ranch, you run it alone?" "Got a few hands. Good men. They keep things running when I'm away." He studied her for a moment. "What about you? Want to tell me why Clayton Sullivan's daughter was walking alone at dawn with nothing but a small bag to her name?" Josephine stared at the ground. "My father found some letters. Correspondence between myself and the town's schoolteacher, Mr. Bennett. They were intellectual discussions, nothing improper, but my father." She swallowed hard. He has very specific ideas about who I should associate with. He called me shameless, said I was bringing disgrace to the family name. And he threw you out for that. Adam's voice held a note of disbelief. Not exactly, Josephine admitted. He locked me in my room last night, said he'd found a solution, a marriage to Mr. Harrington, Clyde Harrington. The man's old enough to be your father, and wealthy enough to expand my father's holdings considerably. Josephine's voice was bitter. I climbed out my window before dawn. I'd rather take my chances in the desert than be sold like cattle to strengthen my father's business empire. Adam was quiet for a long moment. Your father's not a man who takes defiance lightly. He'll look for you, I know. Fear crept back into her voice, but I couldn't stay. No, Adam agreed, you couldn't. He stood and offered his hand. We should keep moving. They continued north, the landscape gradually changing as they climbed in elevation. The saguaros gave way to prickly pear and ocotillo, and eventually to scattered juniper trees. The air grew cooler, and Josephine was grateful for the warmth of Adam's body behind her. By mid-afternoon, they crested a rise, and Adam pointed to a valley below. There it is, Lawson Ranch. Josephine took in the sprawling property with surprise. A large ranch house of adobe and wood sat nestled against a hillside, with several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn spread out below it. A creek larger than the one they'd stopped at earlier wound through the property, bordered by green grass and trees that must have been deliberately planted. It was beautiful, unexpected in this harsh landscape. It's lovely, she said sincerely. Took 7 years to build it up to what you see, Adam replied, a note of pride in his voice. Was nothing but a shack and some scrubland when I bought it. They rode down toward the ranch, and as they approached, Josephine saw 2 men exit the barn. They watched the approaching riders with curious expressions that turned to surprise when they realized Adam wasn't alone. That's Miguel and Daniel, Adam explained as they drew closer. Miguel oversees the cattle, Daniel manages the horses. There's also Tom, who's probably out checking the north pasture. Josephine nodded, suddenly nervous. What would these men think of her arriving unannounced with their boss? What story would Adam tell them? Adam seemed to read her thoughts. You don't need to worry. They're good men, and they don't ask questions that aren't their business. They dismounted in front of the barn where Miguel and Daniel approached. Both tipped their hats respectfully to Josephine. Boss, Miguel said, his eyes curious but his expression neutral. Didn't expect you back so soon. Change of plans, Adam replied easily. This is Miss Josephine. She'll be staying with us for a while. He turned to Josephine. Miguel Ortiz and Daniel Cooper. Josephine managed a small smile. Pleased to meet you both. The men nodded, clearly curious but, as Adam had predicted, asking no questions. Daniel, would you see to Sadie? She's had a long day carrying double. Adam gestured to his horse. Yes, sir, Daniel replied, taking the reins. Come on, Adam said to Josephine. Let's get you settled. He led her toward the main house, a structure far more impressive up close than it had appeared from a distance. The adobe walls were thick, designed to keep out both the summer heat and winter cold, while the wooden beams and posts spoke of substantial effort to transport materials to this remote location. Inside, the house was surprisingly spacious and well appointed. Not lavish by the standards Josephine was accustomed to in her father's home, but comfortable and thoughtfully arranged. A large main room contained a dining table, sitting area with 2 upholstered chairs and a small sofa, and a substantial stone fireplace. Bookshelves lined one wall, unexpected in a ranch house and immediately drawing Josephine's attention. The kitchen's through there, Adam said, pointing to a doorway. And there are 3 bedrooms. Mine, a guest room that's yours now, and my office, which has a cot for when I work late." Josephine followed him down a short hallway to a modestly sized bedroom containing a bed, a chest of drawers, a small table with a basin and pitcher, and a window overlooking the creek. "It's not what you're used to, I'm sure," Adam said, watching her reaction. "It's perfect," Josephine replied truthfully. The room was clean and bright, with simple but well-made furniture, a far cry from her elaborately decorated bedroom at her father's ranch, but somehow more appealing for its lack of pretension. "There's a bathhouse out back," Adam continued. "I'll have Miguel heat some water if you'd like to wash up." Josephine nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I'll find you something to wear in the meantime. I've got some shirts that might work until we can get you proper clothes." Left alone, Josephine set her satchel on the bed and opened it, taking stock of her meager possessions. A nightgown, a change of undergarments, a hairbrush, a small wooden box containing her mother's locket and a few other keepsakes, and the book she'd been reading, a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets. Not much to show for 19 years of life. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Adam stood there with a folded shirt and a pair of trousers. "These might be too big, but they're clean," he said, handing them to her. "Miguel's heating water. Should be ready in about 30 minutes. "Mr. Lawson, Adam," Josephine began, "I don't know how to thank you for your kindness, but I can't impose on you indefinitely. I need to find work, make my own way. There's time enough to figure all that out," Adam interrupted gently. "For now, rest. Get your bearings. We can talk about what comes next when you're ready." After he left, Josephine sat on the edge of the bed, the borrowed clothes in her lap. The events of the past 24 hours seemed unreal, being disowned by her father, walking the desert roads alone, being rescued by a stranger who was now offering her shelter with no apparent expectations in return. It was almost too much to process. The promised bath was heavenly, the small bathhouse behind the main house providing privacy and the luxury of hot water to wash away the dust and sweat of the journey. Adam's shirt hung large on her frame but was soft from many washings. The trousers were impossible, far too big in the waist and too long in the leg, so she made do with just the shirt, which fell almost to her knees, and her own undergarments beneath. By the time she returned to the house, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. She found Adam in the kitchen, slicing bread to go with a pot of beans and meat simmering on the stove. "The men usually eat in the bunkhouse," he explained, "but sometimes they join me here. I told them to give you some space tonight, though." "They don't have to avoid their own house on my account," Josephine protested. "It's my house," Adam corrected mildly. "And they understand a lady might want privacy after a long journey." The word lady made Josephine smile wryly. "I'm not sure I qualify as that anymore. Ladies don't run away from home or wear men's shirts as dresses." Adam's expression remained serious. "A lady is defined by her character, not her circumstances or her clothing. At least that's what my mother always said." The simple meal they shared was better than Josephine expected, and she found herself hungrier than she'd realized. Adam ate quietly, seemingly comfortable with silence in a way few people were. It should have been awkward dining alone with a man she barely knew, wearing his clothing, completely dependent on his goodwill, but somehow it wasn't. "Tell me about your ranch," she said as they finished their meal. "How did you come to be in Arizona territory?" Adam leaned back in his chair, considering. "Like I said, I'm from Kentucky originally. After the war, I fought for the Union. I couldn't go back. Too many memories. So I drifted west, worked cattle drives in Texas, did some scouting for the Army, saved my money and bought this place in '71. It was nothing then, a broken-down shack and some overgrazed land that nobody wanted. "And you turned it into all this," Josephine said, impressed. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Took time, and a lot of help. Miguel was my first hire. He knows cattle better than anyone I've ever met. Daniel came a year later. Tom joined up 2 years ago. We're small compared to your father's spread, but we do all right." "What do you raise?" "Cattle mainly, but we've got some good horses too. Daniel's got away with them. He's breeding some fine stock that's starting to get noticed." The conversation flowed easily between them as the evening deepened. Adam asked about her interests, and Josephine found herself telling him about her love of books, her passion for learning that had always been somewhat discouraged at home. "My mother understood," she explained. "She would bring me books whenever she went to Tucson or Phoenix. But after she died 5 years ago," Josephine trailed off, the familiar ache of loss still sharp after all this time. "That's why you were writing to the schoolteacher," Adam said with understanding. Josephine nodded. "Mr. Bennett had a library of his own. He lent me books, and we would discuss them through letters. My father wouldn't allow me to visit the school or be seen conversing with him. He said it wasn't proper for a young lady of my position. So we wrote instead." She sighed. "I never imagined my father would react so violently to something so innocent." "Some men fear what they don't understand," Adam replied. "And your father has always struck me as a man who values control above all else." "You know him?" Josephine asked, surprised. "We've crossed paths at livestock auctions. He's tried to buy me out a few times over the years." This was new information. "And you refused?" Adam nodded. "This land is mine. I built it from nothing. I'm not interested in being absorbed into the Sullivan empire." The way he said it, without bravado or resentment, just simple fact, made Josephine study him more closely. Adam Lawson was unlike any man she'd met before, self-contained but not cold, straightforward but not harsh. There was a quiet strength to him that had nothing to do with physical power and everything to do with an unshakable sense of his own mind. As darkness fell completely, Adam lit lamps around the room, casting a warm glow over the simple furnishings. "You must be tired," he said. "Don't feel you need to stay up on my account." "Actually, I am rather exhausted," Josephine admitted. The emotional trauma of being cast out, coupled with the physical demands of her unexpected journey, had left her drained. "Sleep as long as you need tomorrow," Adam told her as he walked her to her bedroom door. "No one will disturb you." "Thank you," Josephine said, pausing at the threshold, "for everything." Adam nodded, his eyes serious in the lamplight. "Rest well, Josephine." Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Josephine lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the night sounds of the ranch so different from what she was used to in Florence. The creek bubbled softly outside her window, crickets chirped, and occasionally she heard the distant nickering of horses. Her mind kept returning to the strange twist of fate that had brought her here, to the home of a man who stood against everything her father represented. She wondered what tomorrow would bring, and how long this unexpected sanctuary would last before reality intruded once again. Dawn broke with a chorus of roosters and the sounds of men beginning their day's work. Josephine woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed in her own clothes, rumpled from being in her satchel but preferable to appearing at breakfast in nothing but Adam's shirt. The main room was empty when she entered, but a coffee pot sat warming on the stove, and a plate of biscuits covered with a cloth waited on the table. A note in a strong, clear hand sat beside them. "Had to check the north pasture. Help yourself. Back by noon. A.L." Josephine poured herself coffee and took a biscuit, then wandered to the bookshelves that had caught her attention the previous day. They contained an eclectic collection, practical volumes on animal husbandry and agriculture alongside works of literature, history, and philosophy. She ran her fingers along the spines, stopping at familiar titles and discovering new ones. She selected a book of poetry she hadn't read before and settled into one of the comfortable chairs. The morning passed peacefully. The simple pleasure of reading uninterrupted, a luxury she rarely experienced at home, where there were always social obligations or household duties to attend to. Around mid-morning, a knock at the door startled her. Setting aside her book, Josephine hesitated, unsure if she should answer in Adam's absence. The knock came again, and she decided it would be rude to ignore it. Opening the door, she found Miguel standing there, hat in hand. "Miss Josephine," he said with a respectful nod. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," she assured him. "Mr. Lawson is checking the north pasture, I believe." "Yes, madam, I know." Miguel shifted slightly. "I actually came to see if you might need anything. My wife, Elena, asked me to invite you to our house for lunch. She thought you might appreciate some female company." The kindness of the invitation brought unexpected tears to Josephine's eyes. "That's very thoughtful," she managed. "I would like that very much." Miguel's face brightened. "Good. Our house is just down by the creek, the small one with the red door. Elena will be expecting you around noon if that suits." After he left, Josephine returned to the bedroom to assess her appearance. Her dress was wrinkled but serviceable, and she did her best to arrange her hair neatly with just her fingers and hairbrush. She wished she had something to offer as a hostess gift, but her satchel contained nothing appropriate. At noon, she made her way to the small house Miguel had described. It was a neat adobe structure with carefully tended flowers growing along the path to the door. Before she could knock, the door swung open to reveal a petite woman with a warm smile and bright eyes. "You must be Miss Josephine," the woman said. "I am Elena. Please come in." The interior of the small house was spotlessly clean and decorated with colorful woven textiles and simple but attractive furniture. Delicious smells emanated from the kitchen area, and a table was already set for a meal. "Thank you for inviting me," Josephine said. "It's very kind of you." "It is nothing," Elena replied, gesturing for Josephine to sit. "Miguel told me what little he knows that Mr. Lawson found you on the road from Florence. I thought perhaps you might want to talk with another woman, or at least enjoy a meal not cooked by a man." Her eyes twinkled with humor. Josephine smiled, immediately warming to Elena's friendly manner. "Mr. Lawson's cooking seemed quite adequate, but I must admit, whatever you're preparing smells wonderful. Just some chicken enchiladas, my mother's recipe." Elena moved to the stove, checking on her cooking. "So you are from Florence. The Sullivan family." Josephine tensed slightly, wondering how much she should reveal, but something in Elena's open expression encouraged honesty. "Yes, though I doubt my father considers me part of that family anymore." Elena nodded, not pushing for details. "Families can be complicated. I left my own home in Sonora when I was not much older than you appear to be. My parents did not approve of Miguel. They had arranged a marriage for me with the son of a wealthy landowner." She shrugged. "I chose love instead, and you don't regret it?" Josephine asked softly. Elena's smile was answer enough. "Never. It has not always been easy, but Miguel is a good man and we have built a happy life together." She brought the food to the table and sat across from Josephine. "And you? What will you do now?" "I don't know," Josephine admitted. "I need to find work, support myself somehow." "What skills do you have?" It was a practical question, but Josephine found herself at a loss. As the daughter of a wealthy rancher, she'd been educated in the social graces, how to run a household, entertain guests, manage servants, but had few marketable skills. I can read and write well, she said finally. I know some arithmetic. I can sew and cook, though not as well as you, I'm sure. Alina considered this. Reading and writing are valuable skills. Perhaps you could teach. There are many children on the surrounding ranches who have no schooling. The idea appealed to Josephine immediately. Do you really think that would be possible? Why not? I know several families who would welcome someone to teach their children. Alina served the enchiladas, the spicy aroma making Josephine's mouth water. But first, eat. Everything is easier to consider on a full stomach. The meal was delicious, and the conversation flowed easily between the two women. Alina told stories of her life in Sonora, her courtship with Miguel, and their 7 years at Lawson Ranch. In turn, Josephine shared carefully edited tales of her childhood in Florence, her mother's influence, and her love of books. "And what do you think of our Mr. Lawson?" Alina asked eventually, a knowing gleam in her eye. Josephine felt herself flush. "He's been very kind to offer me shelter." "He is a good man," Alina said seriously. "The best I know except for my Miguel. But he carries sadness with him always." "What happened to him?" Josephine couldn't help asking. Alina shook her head. "That is his story to tell if he chooses. I will say only that he has known great loss, and it changed him." After lunch, Alina insisted on sending Josephine back with a basket containing fresh tortillas, some dried herbs from her garden, and a dress that she claimed no longer fit her. "You are taller than me, but with a belt, it should serve until you can get your own things," Alina said, pressing the bundle into Josephine's hands. "I can't take your dress," Josephine protested. "You can and you will," Alina replied firmly. "A woman needs more than one dress, and this one has been sitting in my chest for 2 years. Better it should be worn than wasted." Touched by the generosity, Josephine impulsively hugged the older woman. "Thank you for everything." "Come back any time," Alina told her. "My door is always open to you." Returning to the main house, Josephine found Adam had returned. He was seated at the table, papers spread before him, making notes in a ledger. He looked up when she entered, his expression brightening slightly. "There you are," he said. "Miguel mentioned he'd invited you to lunch with Alina." "She was very kind," Josephine replied, setting down the basket, "and a wonderful cook. She sent these back for you." Adam smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. "Alina's tortillas are the best in the territory. She knows they're my weakness. She also gave me this," Josephine added, holding up the dress. "She insisted." "That sounds like Alina. She has a generous heart." Adam closed his ledger. "Did you have a good morning otherwise?" "I did, thank you. Your library is impressive." "Books are another weakness of mine," he admitted. "Not much entertainment out here otherwise." Josephine nodded toward the papers on the table. "I'm interrupting your work. Just going over the breeding records for our horses." Adam gathered the papers. "Nothing that can't wait." "Actually," Josephine said tentatively, "Alina suggested something I wanted to discuss with you." Adam raised an eyebrow. "Oh." She thought perhaps I might be able to teach reading and writing to children from nearby ranches. She said many lack formal education. "That's true enough," Adam agreed. "There's no school for 20 miles, and most families can't spare their children for the journey even if there was one." "You think it's a possibility?" "I could use the guest room as a classroom during the day and perhaps charge a small fee to support myself." The idea was taking hold in Josephine's mind, growing from Alina's suggestion into a real plan. Adam considered it, his blue eyes thoughtful. "It could work. I know at least 4 families within riding distance who have mentioned wishing their children could learn their letters. And the Hendersons over at Copper Creek have 6 children alone." Excitement built in Josephine's chest. "So you wouldn't mind if I used your home as a school?" It's your home too, for as long as you need it, Adam replied simply. And education is something I believe in strongly. My mother was a schoolteacher back in Kentucky. This new piece of information made Josephine look at him with fresh eyes. It explained the extensive library, the educated way he spoke despite his rugged appearance and occupation. Thank you, she said, meaning it from the depths of her heart. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. You don't need to, Adam replied, his voice gentle. Just make the most of this chance to build the life you want. That's repayment enough. Over the next 2 weeks, Josephine threw herself into establishing her small school. Adam introduced her to neighboring ranchers, who responded with enthusiasm to the idea of education for their children. The guest room was transformed with a blackboard Adam ordered from Tucson, and simple benches constructed by Daniel, who proved to be skilled with woodworking tools. By the beginning of May, Josephine had 12 students ranging in age from 6 to 15, attending classes 3 days a week. The children arrived on horseback or in wagons, some traveling considerable distances for the opportunity to learn. Josephine discovered she had a natural aptitude for teaching, finding creative ways to engage students of different ages and abilities simultaneously. The modest fees the families paid allowed her to begin saving money and to contribute to the household expenses, despite Adam's protests that it wasn't necessary. More importantly, the work gave her purpose and a sense of independence she'd never experienced before. Living at Lawson Ranch settled into a comfortable routine. Josephine taught during the day, helped prepare meals, and spent evenings reading or conversing with Adam. On weekends, she often visited Alina, who was teaching her to make tortillas and enchiladas, skills her privileged upbringing had never included. Through it all, she found herself growing increasingly drawn to Adam. He was unfailingly kind and respectful, never presuming or pushing boundaries. He spoke to her as an equal, valued her opinions, and treated her with a courtesy that felt natural rather than formulaic. They shared an interest in books, often discussing what they were reading during the quiet evenings. Adam revealed a deep knowledge of history and literature that continually surprised her, given his rugged exterior and practical occupation. He listened intently when she spoke, his blue eyes focused on her face as if her thoughts mattered to him. Small moments began to accumulate in Josephine's heart, Adam bringing her wildflowers he'd spotted while checking fences, his hand steadying her elbow as they walked across the uneven ground to the creek. The way his face softened when he watched her with the children. How he'd built a small shelf in her bedroom specifically for the books she borrowed most often from his collection. For his part, Adam seemed to be blooming in her presence, like a desert plant after rain. The sadness Alina had mentioned was still there in his eyes sometimes, but his smile came more readily, and he spoke more freely as the weeks passed. Miguel commented on the change one day when he thought Josephine couldn't hear, telling Daniel, "The boss is more like his old self since Miss Josephine came. It's good to see." One evening in late May, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the soft rushing of the creek. "I had a letter from Tucson today," Adam said finally, "from a lawyer I know there." Josephine tensed, immediately afraid that her father had discovered her whereabouts. "Oh, he says your father has been making inquiries throughout the territory, looking for you." Adam turned to face her, his expression serious. "He's offering a substantial reward for information on your location." Fear clutched at Josephine's heart. "Do you think anyone here would know?" Adam interrupted firmly. "My men are loyal and our neighbors respect your privacy." but eventually, word might reach someone willing to collect that reward. What should I do? The life she'd begun to build here suddenly felt precarious, threatened by her father's long reach. Adam was quiet for a moment, considering. There are options. You could go farther away, California, perhaps, or up to Colorado. My lawyer friend could help arrange transportation. The thought of leaving made Josephine's chest tighten painfully. This place had become home to her in a way her father's grand house never had. And the idea of never seeing Adam again. I don't want to run, she said finally. This is where I belong now. My students need me. Alina has become like a sister, and you. She trailed off, not sure how to express what he had come to mean to her. There's another option, Adam said quietly, his eyes on the darkening horizon. One that would make it much harder for your father to force you to return. Josephine turned to look at him, questioning. Marriage, Adam said simply. A married woman can't be compelled to return to her father's house. Her husband becomes her legal protector. Josephine's breath caught in her throat. Are you suggesting it could be in name only? Adam added quickly. Just a legal protection. Nothing would have to change between us. The disappointment that flooded Josephine at those words surprised her with its intensity. I see, she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. Adam was watching her face carefully. Unless you wanted things to change. The air between them seemed to still, charged with possibility. Josephine found she couldn't look away from his eyes, which held a vulnerability she'd never seen there before. I think perhaps I would, she whispered. Adam reached out slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. Josephine, he said, his voice low and serious, I need you to be sure. I'm not a wealthy man like your father. I can't give you the life you grew up with. I don't want that life, she replied with certainty. I want this one, the one I've found here. With you. The look that crossed Adam's face then was like sunrise breaking over the mountain's warmth and light dispelling shadows. He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I've been falling in love with you since the moment I found you on that desert road, he confessed. But I never thought someone like you could care for someone like me. Someone like me, Josephine repeated with a small smile. You mean stubborn, opinionated, and cast out by her family. Adam laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I meant beautiful, educated, and far too good for a rough rancher like myself. I think I'm exactly where I belong, Josephine said softly, with exactly who I belong with. Adam's hand moved to cup her cheek, and she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the tenderness of the gesture. When she opened them again, his face was closer, his expression asking a question. She answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was tentative at first, both of them uncertain, but it deepened as Adam's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. Josephine felt as though something long dormant within her had suddenly bloomed to life, filling her chest with warmth and light. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Josephine Sullivan, he whispered. Not just for protection, but because I love you and want to build a life with you. Yes, she replied without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you, Adam Lawson. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in the nearest town, with Miguel and Alina as witnesses. The ceremony was simple, but Josephine wouldn't have wanted it any other way. She wore the dress Alina had given her, now altered to fit properly, with wildflowers in her hair. Adam had ridden to Tucson the day after their engagement to speak with his lawyer friend, and purchase a ring, a simple gold band that nonetheless represented more love than all the flashy jewels her father had ever given her mother. The day was perfect, filled with joy and the warm wishes of the small community that had accepted Josephine so readily. The children from her school presented them with handmade gifts, and neighbors brought food for a celebration at the ranch afterward. As they danced under the stars that night, Adam held her close and whispered, "Are you happy, Mrs. Lawson?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Josephine replied truthfully, savoring the new name and all it represented. Their first weeks as husband and wife were a sweet discovery of each other. Adam was a gentle, considerate lover, and Josephine found herself blossoming under his tender attention. They settled into a deeper version of the partnership that had already been forming, now enriched by the intimacy they shared, and the knowledge that this was forever. The school continued to grow as word spread, and soon Josephine had more students than the guest room could comfortably hold. Adam suggested converting part of the barn into a proper schoolhouse, and the entire ranch pitched in to make it happen. By July, Josephine had a real classroom with proper desks, a larger blackboard, and even a small library of books Adam ordered from back east. Summer in Arizona brought intense heat, but the creek provided relief, and the elevation of the ranch kept temperatures more moderate than in the lower desert. Josephine found herself adapting to ranch life with surprising ease, learning to ride better under Adam's tutelage, and even helping with some of the lighter ranch work when school wasn't in session. The shadow of her father's anger still loomed occasionally, but it grew fainter with time. Adam's lawyer confirmed that as a married woman, Josephine was legally beyond Clayton Sullivan's control, though they remained vigilant in case he tried other means of retaliation. In late August, just as the worst heat began to break, Josephine woke one morning feeling unusually queasy. The sensation passed quickly, but returned the next day and the next. It was Alina who first suggested what might be happening. "When did you last have your monthly time?" she asked bluntly as they worked together in Alina's garden. Josephine blushed, counting back in her mind. "Oh," she said softly, realization dawning. "I didn't even notice with the school and everything." Alina smiled knowingly. "You should tell Adam. He will be overjoyed." That evening, after dinner, Josephine took Adam's hand and led him to the porch where they had shared their first kiss. The air was cooler now, carrying the first hints of autumn, and the sunset was a spectacular display of color. "I have something to tell you," she said, her heart racing with nervous excitement. Adam looked at her expectantly, his eyes warm. "I think that is. I'm fairly certain we're going to have a baby," Josephine managed, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, Adam seemed frozen, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes filled with a joy so pure it took Josephine's breath away. He gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around before setting her gently back down. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby." Josephine nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Are you pleased?" "Please doesn't begin to cover it," Adam replied, cradling her face in his hands. "I love you so much, Josephine Lawson." The baby grew steadily through the fall and winter. Josephine continued teaching, though she reduced the schedule to 2 days a week as her pregnancy advanced. Adam was attentive and protective, ensuring she rested enough and had everything she needed. Alina provided practical advice and traditional remedies for the discomforts of pregnancy, while the women from neighboring ranches brought gifts for the baby, handmade blankets, tiny clothes, and offers of help when the time came. In early April of 1879, almost exactly a year after Josephine had been cast out by her family, she gave birth to a healthy boy they named William Thomas Lawson, after both Adam's father and his friend Tom, who had helped deliver the baby when the midwife couldn't arrive in time due to a flooded creek. holding their son in her arms with Adam beside her, his face alight with pride and love. Josephine felt a completeness she had never known was possible. This was what family truly meant, not the cold obedience and rigid expectations of her childhood home, but this warm circle of love, acceptance, and shared joy. "He's perfect," Adam whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "He is," Josephine agreed. "And so is this life we've made." As spring bloomed around them, turning the desert into a riot of wildflowers and new growth, the Lawson family settled into their new rhythm. William, or Will, as they came to call him, was a cheerful baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. He became the center of their world, adored not only by his parents but by everyone at the ranch. Josephine resumed teaching in the summer, with Will often sleeping in a basket beside her desk, or being passed among the older girls who delighted in holding him. Adam expanded the ranch operations, adding more cattle and beginning to breed horses more seriously under Daniel's expert guidance. The land flourished under their careful management, and the ranch's reputation for quality stock grew throughout the territory. In October, they received an unexpected letter addressed to Mrs. Josephine Lawson in an unfamiliar hand. Opening it with curiosity, Josephine was stunned to find it was from Martha Bennett, the wife of the schoolteacher whose correspondence with Josephine had precipitated her exile from home. "Dear Mrs. Lawson," the letter began, "you may be surprised to hear from me, as we never met formally in Florence. My husband often spoke highly of your intellect and your love of literature during your correspondence, which I assure you I never found improper. I write now because I thought you should know that your father, Mr. Sullivan, suffered a severe riding accident 3 weeks ago. While he survived, the doctors say he will never walk again. In his incapacitated state, he has been asking for you. I understand completely if you choose not to respond, but I felt you should be informed. Respectfully, Martha Bennett." Josephine sat with the letter in her hands for a long time, conflicted emotions warring within her. Her father had disowned her, threatened to marry her off against her will, and then hunted for her across the territory. Yet he was still her father, and now he was injured and asking for her. When Adam returned from the fields that evening, she showed him the letter. "What do you want to do?" he asked after reading it, his expression neutral but his eyes watchful. "I don't know," Josephine admitted. "Part of me says I owe him nothing, but another part feels the pull of family," Adam finished for her. "Even when they've hurt us, blood ties are powerful things." "Would you hate me if I wanted to see him?" Josephine asked softly. "Just once." Adam took her hands in his. "I could never hate you for having a compassionate heart. It's one of the things I love most about you. You'd come with me." The thought of facing her father alone was too daunting to contemplate. "Of course," Adam replied without hesitation. "You're my wife. Where you go, I go, especially into difficult situations." 2 weeks later, they made the journey to Florence, leaving Will in Alina's capable care. The town hadn't changed much in the year and a half since Josephine had fled, but she had changed immeasurably. As they rode down the main street toward her father's ranch, she felt none of the fear or uncertainty that had plagued her as a young woman under his roof. Now she was Josephine Lawson, wife, mother, teacher, a woman who had built her own life on her own terms. Clayton Sullivan's house was as imposing as ever, a grand 2-story structure that dominated the landscape. A servant answered their knock, eyes widening in recognition when he saw Josephine. "Miss Sullivan." "I mean, Madam, Mrs. Lawson," Josephine corrected gently. "Is my father receiving visitors?" The servant led them to the study where Clayton had apparently taken to spending his days, unable to manage the stairs to the upper floor. He sat in a wheeled chair near the window, His once powerful frame diminished, his face lined with pain and age. He turned at their entrance, and shock registered on his features when he saw Josephine. For a long moment, father and daughter simply stared at each other across the space that represented so much more than physical distance. "Josephine," Clayton finally said, his voice rougher than she remembered. His eyes moved to Adam, narrowing slightly. "Lawson." "Mr. Sullivan," Adam acknowledged with a slight nod, his hand firmly on Josephine's back, offering silent support. "So you found shelter with my business rival," Clayton said to Josephine, a familiar note of disapproval in his voice. "I found more than shelter," Josephine replied evenly. "I found happiness, purpose, and true family." Something flickered across Clayton's face, regret, perhaps, or just recognition of what he'd lost. "They say you're teaching now, running some kind of school." "Yes, we have 28 students currently, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. The school is on our ranch," Adam explained. "Josephine built it from the ground up. The whole community supports it." Clayton's gaze sharpened. "Married then?" Josephine nodded. "For over a year now, and we have a son, William. He's 6 months old." This news seemed to hit Clayton hard. He looked away, toward the window where the desert landscape stretched to the horizon. "A grandson," he murmured, almost to himself. The conversation that followed was stilted, full of awkward pauses and careful navigation around painful topics. Clayton asked about the ranch, the school, and eventually, hesitantly, about William. Josephine answered honestly but guardedly, still unsure of his motives in asking for her. Finally, as the afternoon light began to fade, Clayton seemed to come to some decision. "I was wrong," he said abruptly, the words clearly difficult for him. "About many things, but especially about you. Your mother always said you had her spirit, too much of it for your own good, I thought. But she was right, and I was wrong." Josephine felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at this first-ever admission of fault from her always righteous father. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Clayton continued. "I don't deserve it, but I would like, if you're willing, to know my grandson." Adam's hand tightened slightly on Josephine's shoulder, but his expression remained neutral, leaving the decision entirely to her. "I think that might be possible," Josephine said carefully. "Not right away. There's too much between us still, but perhaps, with time." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a possibility of healing that Josephine hadn't expected to find when she'd entered this house. As they rode away that evening, headed for the hotel where they would stay before beginning the journey home tomorrow, Adam asked, "Are you all right?" Josephine considered the question seriously. "Yes," she said finally, "I think I am. I didn't go there expecting anything, certainly not an apology. It doesn't erase what happened, but it's something," Adam finished for her. "A beginning, maybe." "Yes." Josephine smiled at him, grateful beyond words for his understanding and support. A beginning. They returned to Lawson Ranch the next day, reuniting joyfully with Will and sharing the story of their visit with Alina and Miguel. Life resumed its pleasant rhythm, but with a new dimension: occasional letters from Florence, stilted at first but gradually warming, and eventually, as Will approached his first birthday, a visit from Clayton Sullivan himself. The meeting between grandfather and grandson was touching to witness. Clayton, still in his wheeled chair but seeming less diminished than he had in Florence, held the boy with a tenderness Josephine could not recall ever seeing from him before. "He has your mother's eyes," Clayton said, looking up at Josephine, "and your determination." "And his father's kindness," Josephine added, watching Adam with Will later that day as he patiently helped the baby stand, supporting him as he took wobbly steps. The visit lasted 3 days, during which Clayton saw the school in session. toured the ranch operations with Adam, and spent hours with Will. When he left, there was an understanding that this would not be his last visit, and that perhaps in the summer, when travel was easier, Josephine and Adam might bring Will to Florence. "Your father is a complicated man," Adam observed after Clayton's departure. "Stubborn, proud, set in his ways but capable of change, it seems." "Perhaps that's something I inherited from him," Josephine replied with a small smile. "The stubbornness, at least." "Definitely the stubbornness," Adam agreed, earning a playful swat from his wife. As the years passed, the Lawson family flourished. Will was joined by a sister, Elizabeth Alina, in 1881, and a brother, James Miguel, in 1884. The school grew to require 2 teachers, with Josephine hiring a young woman from Tucson to help with the increasing number of students. The ranch prospered as well, expanding its operations and developing a reputation for some of the finest horses in the territory. Adam and Miguel's careful breeding program paid dividends, with buyers coming from as far as California and Texas. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, though the original ranch house remained as part of the property, eventually becoming additional classroom space. Clayton Sullivan became a regular visitor, making the journey from Florence several times a year despite his disability. He never fully reconciled with his daughter's choice of life, occasionally making remarks about the modesty of their home compared to his own, or questioning the wisdom of Adam's business decisions. But he doted on his grandchildren and, in his own way, came to respect the life Josephine and Adam had built together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adam surprised Josephine with a special gift, a small publishing press, ordered all the way from Chicago. "For your school primers," he explained as she stared in amazement at the complicated machinery now installed in a corner of the barn. "You've been talking about creating materials specifically for frontier children. Now you can make them yourself." It was a thoughtful gift, perfectly suited to Josephine's ambitions for her school. Over the next few years, she would indeed create and publish a series of readers featuring stories of frontier life, which would eventually be used in small schools across Arizona Territory and beyond. On a warm evening in the spring of 1889, Josephine and Adam sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Will, now 10, was teaching 6-year-old James how to throw a lasso, while 8-year-old Elizabeth read a book nearby, periodically looking up to offer critique of her brother's technique. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked suddenly, his voice low enough that the children wouldn't hear. "Regret what?" Josephine turned to look at him, puzzled. "Any of it. Being thrown out by your father, being found by a dusty rancher on the road to nowhere, the life you might have had if things had been different." Josephine considered the question seriously, as she always did when Adam asked something important. She thought about the frightened, sheltered girl she'd been, walking away from Florence with nothing but a small bag and wounded pride. She thought about the woman she was now, a teacher, a mother, a wife, respected in her community, and finally, cautiously, reconciled with her past. "Not for a single moment," she said finally, reaching for Adam's hand. "Everything that happened led me here, to this life, these children, to you." "How could I regret that?" Adam's fingers intertwined with hers, the familiar calluses and strength as comforting as they had been the first time he'd helped her onto his horse. "I thank God every day for whatever twist of fate put me on that road at that exact moment," he said softly. "Finding you was the beginning of everything good in my life." Josephine leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. The journey from that desperate dawn to this peaceful evening had been long and sometimes difficult, but filled with more joy than she could have ever imagined as she walked away from her father's house. "You know what I think," she said after a comfortable silence. I think I was never truly lost. I was just finding my way home." Adam kissed the top of her head gently. "Welcome home, Josephine Lawson," he murmured. "Welcome home." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their children's laughter filled the air around them, the sweetest music either of them had ever known, and the perfect backdrop to a love story that had begun with a chance encounter on a desert road and bloomed into a life more rich and meaningful than either could have dreamed possible.